Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. The Caring Generation focuses on the conversation of caring, giving us permission to talk about aging, the challenges of caregiving, and everything in between. It's no surprise that needing care or becoming a caregiver changes everything. The Caring Generation is here to guide you along the journey to let you know that you're not alone. You are in exactly the right place to share stories and learn about caregiving programs and resources to help you and your loved ones plan for what's ahead. Invite your aging parents, spouses, family, and friends to listen to the program. If you have a question or an idea for a future show, share your idea with me by responding to my social media posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. This week, I'm answering the question of how to deal with dementia in a parent. The program's first half will focus on the idea of mentally shifting to gain a different perspective about caregiving activities and life events. These insights can help shed light on why thinking differently and learning about dementia, Alzheimer's, and other types of memory loss are valuable. In the program's second half, we'll talk about communicating with loved ones. So, focusing on how to deal with dementia in a parent related to practical everyday activities. Let's begin with how to recognize and deal with dementia in a parent. Early on, for a parent, spouse, or another family member, slight signs of forgetfulness may be dismissed as normal aging. You might hear, well, everyone gets a little forgetful with age, or mom and dad have always been a little absent-minded and disorganized. Now, if you don't spend a lot of time with a parent because you don't live near them, or you do live in the same town but don't see them often, noticing signs of memory loss can be challenging. Add to this consideration what I call workarounds. Suppose your parent is highly educated, for example, with a master's degree, or was an engineer, or worked in a field that required a lot of thinking and planning. In that case, mom or dad may be able to hide or manage the effects of early-stage memory loss. Plus, if there is a lack of awareness about dementia or Alzheimer's, forgetfulness and creating processes for workarounds might not be seen as anything unusual for a parent. These are activities a parent would have taken to solve any other problem they faced in life. I had many clients, women in particular, who were able to manage for a long time until their memory loss advanced to a point where living at home became unsafe or difficult. In these cases, a friend or someone close to them, not necessarily a family member, often brought up the topic of memory loss and suggested seeing a doctor. There may have also been other noticeable signs like getting lost when driving a car, forgetting to pay bills, and other things like water flooding in the home because someone forgot to turn off the faucet. The other challenge is that parents or spouses may not regularly see a doctor if they are healthy and active. This lack of regular medical care is valid for persons of all ages who are not knowledgeable about the importance and benefits of annual health checkups. If parents attend annual checkups but don't mention any concern about memory, a primary care doctor isn't going to take any steps to identify memory loss as a concern. So what you have in these situations, which is unfortunate, is a person who may or may not have insight into the degree of their forgetfulness. If a friend or family member brings up the concern, there may be denial about being forgetful or a refusal to see a doctor. The same lack of awareness applies to any health condition: heart disease, diabetes, COPD. When these diseases remain undiagnosed, they cause more problems later. For this reason, an annual health checkup, even if you think you don't need it, has benefits. Even if one sees a primary doctor who confirms early memory loss, the diagnosis may be classified as mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, which may not be taken seriously. If the doctor a parent sees is not comfortable or experienced in diagnosing memory loss, or if you or your parent don't ask questions, this is a missed opportunity to learn about preventative steps. So with MCI, there can be this sense of limbo about having advancing memory loss, with a person wondering, do I or don't I? Not having enough or the necessary information is why looking at research and asking questions about memory loss testing becomes very important. Family caregivers must be proactive and ask how to deal with dementia in a parent to avoid surprises in the future. My experience is that most primary care physicians lack experience in diagnosing dementia and Alzheimer's. This is where connecting with specialists is critical. Make an appointment with a neurologist, neuropsychologist, or geriatrician. Research confirms that mild cognitive impairment is likely to translate into dementia or Alzheimer's. Let's take this thought process and relate it to other chronic diseases like heart disease or diabetes to give a different perspective, since this is the focus of this episode. Heart disease and diabetes, when they advance, are serious illnesses. Both can contribute to a diagnosis of dementia and result in circulatory issues, potential strokes, and other health complications. So let's look at something as simple as high blood pressure or pre-diabetes blood sugar readings. In the early stages, high blood pressure and high blood sugar readings may not show any obvious signs for many people. For this reason, identifying and taking steps to manage these conditions in the early stages is vital for health and well-being, similar to identifying memory loss at an early stage. The earlier you notice these conditions, the more opportunities you have to make adjustments in lifestyle to remain healthy and avoid more health conditions. High blood pressure can turn into major heart disease, require bypass surgery. You may also experience circulatory issues or have a stroke, congestive heart failure, and many other conditions if not monitored. The effects of high blood sugar can be just as severe. Long-term complications of high blood sugar include heart disease, nerve pain, kidney disease, vision, dental, and skin conditions. Both conditions cause problems with other body systems and organs. I like to say that the human body really is a chemistry project, that when kept in balance is positive, but when something happens, one thing causes another and another and another. So if you are an adult child noticing changes, the best way for how to deal with dementia in a parent is to be kind and direct. For example, Mom or Dad, I'm noticing changes in your ability to remember information. Are you noticing anything? Let's assume that an elderly parent says no. The next step is to say, I'm concerned, and I would like you to get this checked just in case it's an early sign of something going on. Then, ask if you can make and attend the doctor's appointment with your parent. At this point, your siblings, if you have them, may be in denial, especially if they don't live near your parents. Any point of denial or resistance is a starting point for how to deal with dementia in a parent, and notice your biases or beliefs about the diagnosis. So let's say that your only frame of reference is a friend's mother who was diagnosed with dementia. Your friend's experience may not have been good, and you remember this. If so, your thoughts around what might happen with mom or dad are already swayed to the negative. This is the activity of the brain trying to make sense of an event by relating it to something in a past experience. There's a word for the brain trying to make sense of information. It's called heuristics. The brain prefers to be efficient and save time. So what happens is that the brain relates A to B and makes a decision or a conclusion. Heuristics supports the brain and may lead to avoidance of assessing new evidence or beliefs. This process can result in being closed-minded or simply stubborn, unless we realize this process and stop the brain from being efficient and sometimes lazy. If you've been a family caregiver for any length of time, you might realize that emotions sway the brain and the decision-making process. I had many adult children say to me, Mom or Dad is being purposely difficult, to be mean to us or to get back at us, when truly this was not the case at all. You see, this simple explanation for memory loss was based on heuristics because it avoided going to thoughts of making a doctor appointment, receiving a diagnosis, and then deciding what to do next. It's the brain's way of saying, let's just put a rug over the issue, cover it up, hide it, ignore it. Maybe it won't get worse. Digging one's head in the sand specific to memory loss or any chronic health condition likely to advance is not the best solution. Admittedly, fear of the unknown can be a deterrent for information seeking. How many times have you been involved in a situation that blew up and went out of control because someone preached doom and gloom, and the issue, after researching it, didn't turn out to be that bad? But when there's no one with a mind willing to ask questions or challenge assumptions, then family members or anyone can fall into herd mentality or be led by the majority who thinks the same or who speaks up or who complains. As the caregiver, you may be the person in denial because you realize that if mom or dad are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you as a child might also be carrying that gene. Dealing with dementia in a parent who has Alzheimer's can be a scary proposition. If you are an adult child caregiver, do you or don't you want more information so that you can prepare for the future? When you think about responding to news, good or bad, the way you think about a parent's diagnosis might arise from the foundation of how you watched your parents manage through changes and challenges throughout their lifetime. Dealing with dementia in a parent can mean looking at the past. Were your parents practical and realistic? Did they search for and want information so that they could be prepared? Or did they respond to situations as they blew up or grew to be out of control? Were they direct and practical about life events? Or were your parents the opposite? Instead of being planners, maybe they were procrastinators or dreamers who blamed others when things didn't work out as planned. If so, You may have heard things like, well, we'll deal with it when it happens. Or, we don't talk about such things because if we do, the event is certain to happen. Learning how to deal with dementia in a parent is challenging when a diagnosis comes late and memory loss is already advanced. It's also difficult if the healthy parent, siblings, or other family members are in denial about the day-to-day situation. So how can you deal with the stress of family members or yourself who might be struggling with looking at the situation from a different perspective that might be more empathetic, compassionate, or proactive, instead of being reactive or stuck in a mindset that is not open to change? Experiencing any type of change, especially if one is already a caregiver, facing so many unexpected situations, can result in hesitance or procrastination. How many caregivers and the persons they care for feel like they've lost control of their lives? This is a very common experience that can lead to avoiding any type of change or shift in mindset. What might be even more difficult to see is that there is magic in taking a different perspective. How might you look at a current situation of caring for an elderly parent with dementia if you were watching from the outside and you as the caregiver were your best friend? Here are a few steps to take and questions to ask yourself to set the stage for gaining perspective. Ask the question, what will my life be like in 1 year if I do nothing? Second, if it's 1 year from now, can you look back and evaluate the stress you are experiencing? Is the anxiety any better? What does your future self know that you did not? Third, write a letter to your future self to explain what's happening today. Fourth, have you dealt with a similar stress in the past year? If so, what actions did you take? Did you set meetings, send emails, do research, gain knowledge? Who did you speak to and about what? Pulling yourself out of the present helps you be more objective and less subjective. We're off to a short break. When we return, more on dealing with dementia in a parent. Pay it forward to help others dealing with health, aging, or caregiving issues by sharing information about my website, PamelaDWilson.com. And if you or anyone you know is seeking practical and detailed steps for caring for aging parents, check out my complimentary online caregiver program. Caregiving doesn't have to be a do-it-yourself job. This podcast, The Caring Generation, answers questions caregivers ask, and it's available worldwide on my website and your favorite podcast and music apps like Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, and others. This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert and elder care consultant on The Caring Generation. Stay with me. I'll be right back. This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiver expert, advocate, and author on The Caring Generation. Check out my website, PamelaDWilson.com, where you will find my online caregiver program, my book, The Caregiving Trap, my caregiver blog, this podcast, and my caregiver library. There's something for everyone. Let's return to how to deal with dementia in a parent by looking forward and backward to gain perspective. Let's talk about backwards first. We can't change the events of the past, but we can learn from them. Before the break, we talked about imagining your life 12 months into the future and writing a letter to yourself today. If your current caregiver situation is not ideal, what limitations exist about your involvement? Are you spending more and more time in care activities? Do you feel like you had a choice in becoming a caregiver? Are your parents refusing outside help? Imagine that the time is 5 years into the future, and you are no longer a caregiver. If you had to write a letter to yourself, what would that letter say? Because day-to-day activities relating to caring for parents can be emotionally distressing, making time to remove yourself physically and mentally has benefits. Being honest, daily routines can put anyone in a mental and physical rut. How many of you have ever had a hamster for a pet? I did as a child, and in fact, we had several hamsters. The little guy or gal gets in that wheel and runs and runs and runs, but goes nowhere. Many caregivers feel like this. You're spinning your wheels. You work and work, and nothing seems to improve. The health of parents, a spouse, or loved ones continues to decline, and as the caregiver, you feel powerless. Most hamsters, if yours were or are anything like the ones I had as a child, spend most of their time trying to figure out how to get out of the cage, only to sometimes end up in a worse situation, like falling down a furnace vent, being unable to get out, being eaten by the family cat, harmed by the family dog, or the hamster faces some other unfortunate event that leads to its death. Similarly, family caregivers can feel trapped like a hamster in a cage, but not always face such tragic situations when trying to escape. I know many family caregivers who delay or give up their careers, delay having children. Maybe their marriages break up, or if they have children, the children can feel ignored and act out at school. Figuring out how to deal with dementia in a parent who will likely need care for years isn't easy. So let's talk about a few practical steps to regain focus and perspective, plus reduce caregiver anxiety and stress, before we talk about more stresses caregivers experience related to communicating with parents who can become agitated, resistant, or even angry. Many caregivers I know and speak with are great list makers. I know for myself, when I might be feeling overwhelmed, spending time organizing and making a list of the next steps I want to take has a calming effect. Or at best case, I feel everything I need to do is more manageable and scheduled. On the other hand, I know a lot of people who keep going and don't make lists or plans because they think that making time to think and plan is a poor use of time. If you try this, what you will find is that time spent in investigating, planning, and creating step-by-step processes will save you time, worry, and reduce the likelihood of ongoing unexpected situations. The discussion and planning components of how to deal with dementia in a parent can help the entire family if you can become the person who leads this effort. You might be wondering, how do I become the person who leads the effort when parents or siblings seem to be fighting me every step of the way? Let me share a thought that I'm taking from Dr. Wayne Dyer from his book, Wishes Fulfilled, page 48, about working from the ego versus a place of peace and service. If you are somewhere and you can grab a pen and a piece of paper, the question I'm about to ask can be invaluable when you feel stressed and pulled into a million different directions. Set aside multiple times a day to ask yourself this question. Are you ready? Right now, in what I am about to say or do my desires stem from my lower self, my ego, or from my higher self? The ego is all about self-serving, ownership, winning, judging other people, and so on. The higher self is about serving, loving, and being in a non-judgmental state of peace. When you think about your responses to this question, you might realize that you have more control over your actions than you think. Let me relate this idea to being around negative places or experiences. Dealing with dementia in a parent is challenging, there's no doubt about it. So where and how are you spending your time? Are you angry with mom or dad because they can't remember things that you think they should be able to remember? Are you fussing with brothers or sisters who aren't helping and who are unlikely to help in the future? Do you get caught up in the news of the day? It's so easy to be caught in a groundswell or tornado, a spiral of emotions and problems and issues when dealing with a parent with dementia. Know that you can choose peace over chaos, but you have to believe that you have this choice. One way to know is to ask yourself the previous question and monitor your responses. Did you get a chance to write that down? It is. Right now, in what I am about to say or do my desires stem from my lower self, my ego, or my higher self that appreciates peace? The more you find yourself in serving, loving, and being non-judgmental, the more quickly you'll be able to balance caregiver responsibilities. As I mentioned earlier, though, this also requires a bit of investigation, work, and a lot of planning. So there's work to be done. While parents or siblings might fight you today, your confidence level will rise and your stress level will decrease when you have a plan and work a plan. Doing this work requires that you do your research so that you know what to expect as memory loss progresses. It also requires some level of participation by a parent with memory loss if their diagnosis is in the early stage. While receiving and talking about the diagnosis can be very emotional, once you and a parent learn the facts and the progression of memory loss, you can have conversations that plan for the practicalities of caregiving responsibilities and advancing care needs. The caveat here is to never assume that you will be the only caregiver, or to assume that you'll be the caregiver forever. Life happens, and the level of dedication you are giving today may not always be possible. My recommendation is to create an activity-based, concrete plan that you document in writing. This plan may initially have you as a helper, but as care needs increase beyond a certain number of hours a week, you agree on other options like paid caregivers coming into the home, or a daycare program, or eventually moving mom or dad to a care community. Moving through these steps forces hard conversations about money to pay for care, legal responsibilities, and investigating public benefit programs. When dealing with a parent with dementia, taking these steps will reduce the anxiety of the situation on a daily, monthly, and weekly basis rather than focusing on why did this or that happen, or the eventual outcome of a parent dying from health complications related to dementia. In some circumstances, the caregiver, could be the healthy spouse or an adult child, dies before the person who needs care because the role of caregiver is stressful. Dealing with dementia in a parent also means learning to deal with outside providers. For example, in-home care agencies, home health, doctor's offices, nursing homes, hospitals, hospice care, and more. When you are in the thick of things, working with providers, return to the question about coming from a place of ego or a place of peace. The same goes for dealing with difficult siblings or even a parent with memory loss. It's important to recognize that much of the resistance and the behaviors that family caregivers experience are a result of memory loss, an inability to recall information or follow conversations. So rather than giving lengthy explanations that may make you feel better as the caregiver, consider that your parent can't recall the beginning of something you said by the time you get to the end of the explanation. This is just the way memory loss progresses. So keep conversations simple. Offer options. For example, Mom or Dad, do you want A or B? Make sure your siblings or others who visit are familiar in the best ways to interact with parents with dementia. A great resource for how to talk to parents with dementia is on the Caring Generation podcast. I will put a link in the show transcript. Dealing with dementia in a parent is as much about examining caregiver biases and ways of thinking about situations as anything else. If you have been a caregiver for some time, I hope the tips offered in this program have been helpful. For all caregivers or persons with memory loss, I suggest seeking out as much education as possible, including joining an in-person or online support group. I have a group on Facebook. It's called the Caregiving Trap. I invite you to join. Thank you for being here with me to hear answers to this week's question, how to deal with dementia in a parent. This is Pamela D Wilson, family caregiving expert on the caring generation. If you're looking for answers to caregiving and aging questions, visit my website, PamelaDWilson.com, where you'll find my caregiving library, online caregiver course, the Caring for Aging Parents blog, and my book, The Caregiving Trap, plus an extensive step-by-step online program to help you learn the A to Z of caring for elderly parents. There are also hundreds of videos answering questions on my YouTube channel. I look forward to being with you all again soon. God bless you all. Sending love to everyone. Sleep well tonight and every night until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for The Caring Generation with host Pamela D. Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D. Wilson's The Caring Generation.